Even if you're really familiar with Arlington, odds are that you don't know about this little tiny cemetery just near the intersection of Cooper Street and Mitchell Street. It's on the edge of the UTA campus in Doug Russell Park. It's the Cemetery of Lost Infants. It's also the Berachah Home Cemetery, a name from the New Testament which loosely translated means Valley of Blessings. And who are these lost infants? You only have to look down. I'm Donna Darovich, and this is another Arlington time capsule. I'm standing here on the little bridge that's basically the unofficial entrance to not only the Berachah Cemetery, but also to Doug Russell Park. It crosses Trading House Creek, which meanders on both sides of the cemetery and also runs through the UTA campus. Now, to get to the cemetery, you just head south on this little bridge, take a right on the little path, and you'll see the historical marker pretty quickly. That's where the cemetery is. So let's go take a look, shall we? The Berachah home began on just a few acres but grew to 70, most of it near the intersection of Cooper and Mitchell Streets. Once a major component of Arlington's identity, all that remains today is the cemetery. UTA's Texas Hall and Davis Hall occupy what was once part of the Berachah campus. If you explore this half-acre cemetery, you'll count about 80 graves, although there's probably some others that aren't marked. But it won't be long before you notice something extraordinary. While there are a few adult graves, most of them are infants, all born to unwed mothers. Tiny markers here bear only the words of infant number 1, infant number 2, or perhaps just a first name, George, Velma, or baby. Or, in one case, twins. Here and there you'll see the marker of a young mother who died, presumably in childbirth. A few adults connected to the home are also interred here. The purpose of being anonymous on the baby graves was to not give away the identity of their unwed, usually teenage mothers. At least 3 markers have been removed, and the name on one has been defaced so badly it can't be read. Why? The long-told story is that one of the unwed mothers in the home named her baby for one of the workers in the home, obviously a person that she really loved. Unfortunately, her baby died, and when it was buried, though, the name of that worker was on it, which was the name she had chosen. Well, the story is the worker later was so afraid that someone might think she was the unwed mother, because it was pretty much an unusual name. The worker defaced the name, so there's only kind of a scar left. The emotion that most people feel when they visit here is indeed sadness at so many lives cut so short. But when you know the whole story of the Berachah home, that sadness will only multiply. The home was different from a lot of maternal homes of that era because its premise was that the young women there would keep their babies and not give them up for adoption. The home's fascinating history is probably best told here at the marker that commemorates the man J.T. Upchurch who founded it along with his wife Maggie. He was born in Texas in 1879 and as a young man declared himself an atheist, but he underwent a religious transformation that was so powerful he became a Methodist minister in Waco and later a Church of the Nazarene Reverend in the DFW area. Now, in 1900, Waco was a far different place than it is today. Waco had its own red light district where it was easy to find liquor, gambling, and prostitution. Upchurch and his wife Maggie decided to save these young women from such a fate, such a life. While doing so, they discovered a common thread among them, that most of them had become pregnant out of wedlock as teenagers. Now, of course, in those days, such an indiscretion was so shameful, they were often cast out of the house by their own family. So there they were, no one to support them, poorly educated, unskilled. So many of them became prostitutes. These erring girls, Upchurch said, were consigned to perdition. Upchurch's ministry in Waco didn't go too well. Influential church members didn't support him, and they certainly didn't support his project. So Reverend Upchurch ended up in North Texas, not as a Methodist, but as a Nazarene, and he established the Home in Arlington in 1903. The Home itself was non-denominational but Christian, which made it easier to raise money from all denominations. But the girls at Berachah, where the average age was about 17, worked and trained to help support themselves and the Home. The major fundraising device was the nationally distributed Purity Journal. It was a sympathy-seeking fundraising newsletter, mostly written by Upchurch, that some described as propaganda, but it was nevertheless highly effective until, that is, the Great Depression came along. So with the economy sagging and battling his own health issues, Upchurch had to close the Home in 1936, but it continued to operate as an orphanage until 1942. By the time Berachah closed, it had seen hundreds of girls and babies pass through its doors. UTA eventually purchased the Home. It was more than 70 acres by then, and it was the 1960s. Upchurch isn't buried there because he died in the 1950s, and the cemetery wasn't used as a cemetery then. As for the cemetery itself, some infants and their mothers died in childbirths, while others fell victim to what was a measles epidemic or during what we now know as the Spanish flu. Originally, there was a small rock chapel here for services that they had, but all the remains of it now are just some stones that form sort of an erosion break in the cemetery. Though Berachah was a major component of Arlington's identity, the memory of it has long since faded since it closed 85 years ago. But it's received a rebirth of sorts, mostly due to a fiction book with a Berachah setting by local author Julie Kibler. It's called Home for Erring and Outcast Girls. Despite its location near the heart of Arlington and nearby construction with tens of thousands of students passing by, the cemetery and the park remain a peaceful place, protected by a fence, many stately oak trees, and the Trading House Creek meandering on either side. From time to time, small toys appear on the grave markers, perhaps gifts from children today to the lost children of the Berachah Home. If you want to know more about Berachah, the UTA Special Collections area on the 6th floor of its main library has the Home's records as well as a substantial photo collection. So if you get a chance someday, visit Special Collections. Even better, come visit the cemetery. And while you're there, maybe say a prayer for all its lost children.